While the mainstream media paints a rose-colored picture of anti-war protests on college campuses across the nation, those paying close attention have seen violent uprisings actually calling for a genocide against Israel. And it's a well-funded, concerted effort. The former terror finance analyst for the U.S. Treasury, Jonathan Schanzer, calls it a constellation of extremist groups that he's been investigating for more than a decade. He testified before Congress in 2016 and then again last November. And two groups stand out in particular. American Muslims for Palestine, AMP, which he says funds Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP.
AMP has built a network of activists that are tormenting Jewish and pro-Israel students on college campuses nationwide. Students for Justice in Palestine rallies are not spontaneous expressions of student dissent.
Now, Schanzer has exposed that AMP's executive director, Osama Abu Irshaid, has personally been on campuses of Columbia and George Washington University, leading these protests and intifada chants. By the way, he was prominently featured on the Hamas military wing's website in 2014. We'll show you that. So the question is, who or what is behind this network of anti-American, anti-Israel groups? Well, Schanzer says AMP is made up of people who worked for Hamas charities like the Holy Land Foundation. They were shut down by the U.S. government. In 2008, the FBI convicted the leaders of the Texas-based Holy Land Foundation for funneling more than $12 million to Hamas under the guise of being a Muslim charity.
I worked at the U.S. Treasury Department in the mid-2000s, and my colleagues and I disrupted several Hamas charities that were operating here in America. I'm talking about the Holy Land Foundation, Kind Hearts, and the Islamic Association for Palestine, also known as IAP. The case against these groups, which provided financial and material support to Hamas, is by now well known. More than a half dozen individuals who previously worked for those Hamas charities now run American Muslims for Palestine.
After being shut down, it appears the Holy Land Foundation simply changed its name to American Muslims for Palestine. The same bad actors with ties to terrorism, once again disguised as a 501c3.
Mr. Chairman, to summarize, the personnel, mission, goals, donors, and infrastructure of AMP share a striking resemblance to the Hamas charities that were dismantled here more than a decade ago.
Well, Jonathan Schanzer has been all over this, exposing Hamas's influence and funding on college campuses. He currently serves as the Senior Vice President of Research at the Foundation of Defense of Democracies, and he joins us live. Jonathan, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. There is so much to unpack here. The first thing that comes to mind, isn't this a national security issue? I know you've said that the guy who concerns you right now is AMP's executive director, Osama Abu Irshaid, who clearly has a questionable background, and there seems to be a connection to Hamas.
Well, yeah, he's the one that is of concern to me right now because we've seen him at Columbia holding the microphone, speaking at a press conference in the encampment there, riling up the crowd. He's leading the chants. We saw him at GW the next day. He was doing the exact same thing, holding the microphone up at the loudspeaker, on the quad, engaging with the encampment, appearing to take a leadership role. And so it's very disconcerting to see an adult who has been a professional organizer for causes known to be close to Hamas. To see him doing that, to see a man who has been engaging with, for example, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, who is, by all accounts, someone who has been hosting and providing material support to Hamas directly in his country. We see this man as a professional activist right now. And the fact that he is on campus should be of serious concern to any university that has been experiencing the chaos that we've seen across the country.
I'm going to ask my producer and director to punch up the picture, though, of Osama Abu Irshaid prominently pictured on Hamas's military wing website in 2014. This is you got this information because it was right there. This is disturbing. I mean, he has a questionable background, and he's been seen on college campuses in America.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. I mean, look, the website, it was a screen grab that we got from from the Wayback Machine. This is from the Hamas Qassam Brigade's
Al-Qassam
website, which
Brigade,
means
yeah.
yeah, so that means this is the military wing of Hamas. Now, his face and his name and a quote for something that he wrote appears in their recommended reading section. So, in other words, they're not saying necessarily that he's a member of Hamas or that he's engaging in anything necessarily illegal, but the fact that they're endorsing him, that they're endorsing his ideas, and the fact that he's been previously associated with an organization that was sued successfully by the family of David Boehm. They claim that IAP was actually an organization that was providing material and financial support to Hamas. That organization was shut down. So now we see him, associated in some way with Hamas or Hamas causes now on two different occasions, and he appears to be on campus riling up the crowd. So this is, I think, it represents risk for the university, any university that appears to be allowing him to be there. That seems to be a problem. And I would say that for those that are concerned about the chaos we've seen on campus, this is something to look out for.
Yeah, help us understand the connection between all of these so-called charities. We have the graphic, and you can just explain it.
Sure. I mean, the first charity that was shut down in the United States was one called Holy Land Foundation. They were formed in 1988 in Richardson, Texas, and they were shut down by the FBI in 2001 for sending $12 million to Hamas. Then you have another one that sprouts up shortly thereafter, and that one's called Kind Hearts. That one was in Toledo, Ohio, and it was a lot of the same lower level individuals from Holy Land. They created a second group that appeared to be doing much of the same thing, and the Treasury Department froze their assets pending an investigation, and Holy Land, or rather Kind Hearts, eventually shut down. And then comes that last one that we just talked about. That's Islamic Association for Palestine. That was an organization that was successfully sued by the family of a young man who was killed by Hamas in the 1990s. They were found guilty in a civil suit in the United States, and they were slapped with a $156 million judgment that they refused to pay as they shut down. These three organizations have contributed a number of people, associates of these organizations, in some cases employees, have ported over to AMP. AMP was created in 2006, and their chairman and founder is the same guy that created the first chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine on the campus of Berkeley back in the late 1990s or early 2000s.
Jonathan, according to your investigation, you bring up a few other names, and I have them right here. Sami al-Arian, right? Hatem Bazian, Salah Sarsour, Taher Herzala, Abdel Basit Hemayel. These guys, right? These are guys you say have troubling pasts. We don't know the full story, but why are they on college campuses? Again, where's the FBI? Again, isn't this a national security issue?
Yeah, I mean, Hatem Bazian is the guy that I just mentioned.
Right.
He's the founder and chairman of AMP, and he's the founder of SJP. And we've seen him at Penn. We've seen him at UC Irvine, UCLA, University of San Diego, California, San Diego. We're seeing him on campuses all over the place. And there's a question of why. Why is he out there, engaging with the students? Why are adults engaging with these students? This does not seem like it's a spontaneous student initiative. This looks like something that's being organized by outsiders. And so that's troubling. We've seen some of the other individuals that you've mentioned. A handful of them have been spotted on other campuses in the Midwest, in the South. So why are these people out there with these students? If this is in fact a student-led effort, why are adults there, and especially adults that have previous associations with charities or nonprofits that have been shut down here in the United States by federal or judicial authorities?
Right. These are all good questions, and I think we deserve to have answers. I mean, a few years ago, according to your research, AMP held a conference on how to, quote, navigate the fine line between legal activism and material support for terrorism. Is AMP doing what the Holy Land Foundation did and still sending money to Hamas? What's going on?
I need to be very clear here. I don't see evidence of wrongdoing. I mean, that's not my job. That's the federal government's job. What I can tell you is that when we see this chaos on campus, and when we do see these calls for genocide and annihilationist rhetoric and intimidation of other students and destruction of property and disruption of everyday business on campuses, I look at that and I look at the past activities of these individuals or the organizations that they were associated with, and I'm deeply troubled by this. And it's for that reason that I've testified before Congress on several occasions and that we've shared some of this information with the general public, because when we see what's happening right now on campus, it is something you can begin to feel that the campuses are losing control. In some cases, the police and the cities and the states, that they're losing control. This is something that needs to be addressed. And again, I wish I had all the answers. I don't have it. But you know what? It's not my job to do that. There are people who are paid by the federal government to do that. And it's my hope that they're at least watching this and getting a sense of who these people are, what they've done in the past, to try to give an indication of what's happening in the present.
So then, okay, why hasn't it been addressed? You know, have people in the federal government taken their eyes off of terrorism?
Well, I would say that after my stint in the U.S. government, there was certainly dropping back to a jog, if you will. After a sprint during the first, let's say, 10 years of the war on terror, there were a lot of people that were looking at Al-Qaeda, at Hamas, and other terrorist organizations. There seemed to be a de-emphasis of that, right? We began to see a pivot toward what we now call great power competition. This idea that we needed to spend more time looking at China or Russia. I think for a time we were looking at the Islamic State, as the primary threat, and there were reasons for doing that. But there's also, I think, reason for the U.S. government to figure out how to walk and chew gum. That we should be able to look at what Hamas is doing, as well as Hezbollah, as well as China and Russia and ISIS and Iran and everything else. And so I think that it does appear that the U.S. government in some way took their eye off the ball. I think for maybe 10 years or so, it really was a lapse. And then I think after 10/7, there was an intense focus. When you see the slaughter of 1,200 people and you see the Middle East on the brink of a regional war, that has a way of focusing the mind of America's bureaucrats. And so there is, I think, an attempt to get right on this, but I do still wonder whether there's more that can be done. Congress has taken an interest. They took an interest back in 2016 when I testified. They took an interest again in 2023, shortly after the 10/7 attacks. I testified again there. We're seeing media interest as evidenced right now by this interview. But I think there is more that needs to be done, especially as you just look around the United States right now. You look at the chaos, you look at the intimidation, you look at the rhetoric. We're at a crisis point, and the federal government does need to step up. This does feel like a moment for the U.S. government to be more involved, not less.
Well, I can't thank you enough for doing the work that you're doing. It's important. It's an important job that you've taken on. Like you said, it's not your job to arrest these people. It's your job to, expose it and let the federal government, let law enforcement take it from here. Jonathan Schanzer, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.